Hello. My name is Nola. At my sister's wedding, she took the mic, pointed straight at me, and said, "Let's all clap for the girl carrying a child whose father won't even claim her." The crowd laughed. My mother stared at the floor. And I stood there, pregnant, humiliated, and alone. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing this wasn't a one-time attack. It was a long, quiet war of erased letters, stolen heirlooms, and carefully staged humiliations. A war where the people who were supposed to protect me planned every wound. But something changed that day. Because someone walked in. And he said one word that shattered their script. "Now I have one question for you. What would you do if your own family tried to bury you while smiling in your face? Would you stay quiet? Or would you finally speak?" The first thing that hit me when I stepped onto the front porch was the scent of fresh paint and rosewater. My childhood home had never looked so polished. Every inch of it gleamed like a magazine spread. White hydrangeas hung from the railings, satin ribbons fluttered in the spring air. I paused, one hand still gripping the car door, and reminded myself to breathe. It wasn't my celebration, I was just a guest. When the door opened, Mom stood there, her smile stretched too tight. "You made it," she said, like she wasn't sure I would. "I said I'd come," I answered softly. Her eyes moved from my face to the plain blue dress I'd chosen, then down to my old sandals. She didn't say anything, but her silence was loud enough. Inside, the house buzzed with voices. Laughter from the living room, clinking glasses from the kitchen, someone shouting directions from the backyard. Every sound reminded me I didn't belong in the rhythm of this house anymore. Isolde swept into view like she was on camera, hair perfect, dress white even though the wedding wasn't until tomorrow. She hugged me the way Southern women do when they don't mean it. "You made it, little sis. I was beginning to think you'd skip out." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, steady but neutral. "Well," she said with a chuckle, "that's good, because you already missed a lot." Then she turned and started giving orders again. I stood there, clutching my purse, trying to remember if this house had always been this loud or if I'd just forgotten what it felt like to be invisible inside it. Mom appeared behind me. "You'll stay in your old room," she said, still not looking directly at me. "Keep your things out of sight. We've got guests all weekend." "Of course." I forced a smile. Wouldn't want to ruin the aesthetic. She didn't catch the sarcasm, or maybe she chose not to. Later, as the rehearsal began, I took a seat at the back of the rented barn venue. The wood smelled sweet, like honey and polish. My mother had insisted I come, said it was the right thing to do for family. So I came, sitting quietly while the bridesmaids practiced their walk. Isolde stood in the center, her voice carrying over the microphone. "Let's run through it again. I want this perfect." "No, not good, perfect." I smiled faintly. She'd been chasing that word all her life. The officiant ran through his lines while August, the groom, nodded along politely. He seemed like a decent man, kind eyes, but tired already. Maybe he saw more than he let on. I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures of the decorations, just to look busy. No one paid me any mind. That was the funny thing about being part of this family, you could be in plain sight and still not exist. When it was time for speeches, Isolde grabbed the mic. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "Before we wrap up, I just want to thank everyone who made this possible. Mom, for your endless work and taste. August, for being the love of my life. My friends, the best bridesmaids a girl could ask for. And of course, our amazing vendors. Even the florist's assistant. You've all made this day what it is." The room applauded. And me? I just sat there. She hadn't said my name. It wasn't an oversight. Isolde never forgot anything, especially not when it came to control. This was her way of reminding me that I didn't make the list. My stomach clenched, but I kept my smile faint and polite. No scene. No reaction. If there's one thing I've learned about humiliation, it's that silence can protect you when words won't. After rehearsal, dinner followed at a long wooden table set under hanging lights. The laughter rose and fell like music. I was seated at the far end, next to a toddler who spent most of the meal flinging peas at my plate. No one noticed. Mom came by once, leaned over my shoulder. "It's best if we keep things peaceful, honey," she whispered. "Sure," I said, stirring the mashed potatoes that had already gone cold. Halfway through dinner, one of the cousins called down the table, "So, Nola, are you even in the wedding?" The laughter that followed wasn't cruel exactly, but it stung all the same. I swallowed the answer that rose in my throat. "No," I said after a pause. "Just here to support." The cousin nodded, already turning away, conversation drifting somewhere I couldn't reach. The plates clinked. Glasses refilled. Stories from shared vacations, high school memories, business success, all stories I wasn't part of. It was like watching a movie I'd never been cast in. When dessert came, I excused myself early. I slipped onto the porch, letting the cool air hit my skin. Fireflies blinked across the yard, tiny sparks of life in the dark. I breathed in the smell of cut grass, trying to ground myself. From inside, I could hear Isolde's voice floating through the window, "We really are the perfect family." I laughed quietly, a sound too bitter to be humor. Leaning against the porch railing, I remembered another time, years ago, when I was 10 and proud of my science fair project. I'd spent weeks building it, a model of the solar system. The night before the presentation, Isolde tore the poster apart to make space on the table for her art portfolio. Mom had said, "Let your sister have it, honey. She needs this more." That was the first time I learned what disappearing felt like. Not all at once, but piece by piece, until there was nothing left to take. I stayed outside until the lights went out and the laughter died down. The hydrangeas rustled in the night wind. Somewhere deep inside, I told myself not to cry. And yet, there I was, still hoping someone would ask if I was okay. It was close to midnight when I made it back upstairs. The porch light still glowed outside, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Laughter had died down hours ago. I could still hear a few plates clinking in the kitchen, maybe Isolde's voice faintly echoing through the hallway, probably replaying the day's success to anyone who'd listen. I didn't bother undressing. I kicked off my sandals, lay back on the narrow twin bed, and let my eyes travel across the room that had once been mine. Everything was still in place, the pale blue walls, the bookshelf with one slanted shelf, the cracked corner of the mirror I broke when I was 12. It was like the space had been frozen in time, waiting for a version of me that no longer existed. The ceiling fan squeaked with every rotation. My bag sat by the dresser, still half-zipped. I hadn't even unpacked. Something in me knew this trip wouldn't need long settling. I reached into the nightstand drawer for my charger, thinking I might distract myself with a podcast or something meaningless. Instead, my hand brushed across something stiff, paper, folded several times. I pulled it out slowly. My name was written on the front. In a handwriting I hadn't seen in months. Calder. I sat up, fully awake now, every nerve tightening. I unfolded the paper. Inside was a printed bus ticket, dated 4 months ago. And a note, handwritten, short and unpolished. "If you're serious about us, come with me. I'll wait till noon." I read it again. And again. My fingers trembled. The air in the room thickened, and suddenly the quiet wasn't comforting, it was cruel. I'd never received this. Not once. My first instinct was to question my own memory. Maybe I'd missed it, or lost it somehow. Maybe I was the one who'd let it slip through the cracks. But no. I knew better. Someone had taken it. Someone had opened mail not meant for them and decided, for whatever reason, that I didn't need to see it. And just like that, the narrative I had built in my mind, the one where Calder ghosted me, where he left me without a word, crumbled. I wasn't abandoned. I was erased. Again. I felt my pulse rising, my throat tightening with that familiar burn. I pressed the letter flat on my lap and stared at the edges of the words, like they might rewrite themselves, offer me some other version of events where this wasn't as cruel as it was. But the truth was sitting there in black ink. Calder hadn't left me. Someone made him leave. I closed my eyes and was immediately pulled back to a night in my workshop, when Calder had stayed late fixing the kiln with me. We'd eaten roasted peanuts from a paper bag, our hands chalky with clay, laughing about a song stuck in his head. His thumb brushed my wrist when he handed me a mug of coffee. He'd looked at me and said, "Whatever happens, I won't disappear. Not from you." But he did. And now I understood why. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself up. The hallway outside was dark. I walked toward the kitchen, not entirely sure what I was going to say, just knowing I couldn't sleep with this sitting on my chest. I found Mom near the sink, drying wine glasses. She turned, startled. "You scared me. What are you doing up?" I held up the letter. "Did you see this?" She looked at it, too long. Her lips parted, then closed. "I handle a lot of the mail," she said quietly. "You know that." "You know I never got this," I said, voice steady. Her eyes flicked away. I don't recall seeing that exact one, but things were hectic around that time. Maybe it got misplaced. She wasn't even trying hard to lie. That's what stung the most. "Was it you?" I asked. She sighed, placing the glass down with deliberate care. "Nola, sweetheart, Calder was not good for your future. You were vulnerable. You needed to focus on yourself. You took my choice away. I protected you." "No," I said, cutting her off, "you controlled me. And you let her do it too, didn't you?" Mom's hands tightened around the towel. "It's not that simple." I nodded slowly. "It never is it? When it comes to Isolde, everything's complicated. But when it comes to me, it's always convenient." She opened her mouth, but I didn't wait. I turned and walked out before I said something I'd regret. I made it back to my room, slammed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My heart raced, but my thoughts were sharp. This wasn't just about a letter. It was about how easily they decided I didn't need love, or agency, or the truth. Like I wasn't capable of choosing my own future. It had always been this way. Every time something good drifted my way, it was taken. Not by strangers, but by family, people who were supposed to care, supposed to protect. And they did protect, just not me. I looked down at the note in my lap. I wasn't broken. I was awake. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid to see what would happen if I fought back. I didn't sleep. I sat up until dawn filtered through the blinds, my eyes dry, letter still in my hand like it might somehow change in the night. When the sun started to color the walls a soft pink, I knew I had to move. Lying still would only give them more time to write me out again. By the time I showered, packed my dress, and got to the wedding venue, the parking lot was half full. It wasn't even 9 yet, but folks in our town treat weddings like sporting events: arrive early, stake your spot, and wait for the show. And this one. Isolde had made sure it was a spectacle. The barn was picturesque, like something out of a bridal magazine. Strings of Edison bulbs lined the wooden beams, white linen draped from the rafters, and the smell of freshly baked bread drifted in from the caterers out back. I paused at the entrance, clutching my garment bag and small purse, and reminded myself, again, not to shrink. "Name?" the young usher asked, not looking up from his clipboard. "Nola Vale." He skimmed the list, then pointed toward the far right side of the seating map. "You're over there, near the water station." I blinked. "I'm family." He gave a rehearsed smile. "This is what I've got, ma'am." I said nothing, took the slip with my row number, and made my way to the edge of the venue. Past the third row where my cousin sat laughing, past the white chairs adorned with pink ribbons. All the way to the back, beside a folding table stacked with bottled water and plastic cups. That's when I saw it. A card on my seat. Printed in block letters, "Staff, Water Service." Not Nola Vale. Not even guessed. My body went still. The kind of still that comes from shock and recognition colliding. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I slid the card into my purse. I didn't want proof. But I couldn't bring myself to leave it behind either. I sat down, back straight, and watched as the bridesmaids posed for photos in their custom robes. My name, apparently, didn't belong in that frame either. I needed to change. There was a small prep room beside the catering space. I slipped in, locked the door, and hung the blush pink gown on the wall hook. It was soft, delicate, off-shoulder with a silk ribbon just under the bust. It looked fine. Until I stepped into it. The waistline pressed tightly across my stomach. Not just snug, tight in a way that felt intentional. It clung to my growing belly, making it impossible to ignore what everyone had so carefully avoided mentioning. I looked at the tag. One size smaller than I'd requested. A mistake. Maybe. But more likely, a subtle form of punishment. The kind Isolde specialized in, pretty on the outside, poisoned underneath. I stared at my reflection. The fabric hugged my curves, spotlighted the bump I'd been hiding under loose sweaters for months. My hands instinctively cradled my midsection, like I could cover what had already been exposed. Outside the bathroom stall, a voice drifted in. Well, I guess someone's been busy. Laughter. My throat tightened, but I stayed silent. Counted to 10. Then to 20. I waited until I couldn't hear their heels clicking anymore. Still, I didn't move. For 10 full minutes, I sat on the closed toilet seat, dress wrinkling in my lap, breathing through the humiliation. I could have left. Walked right out the back door and no one would have noticed until the chairs were filled and the music had started. But that would have meant letting them win. And I was tired of letting them win. When I finally stepped out, I adjusted the dress as best I could. Found a clip to pin the ribbon higher. I stood taller. Let them see what they tried to hide. I walked back to my assigned seat, yes, the one next to the water station, and took my place. The same usher passed by again, refilling the plastic cup tower. He looked at me, hesitated, then asked, "Are you with catering?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I'm the bride's sister." He stammered something, turned, and walked off. The silence around me buzzed with judgment. Whispers floated from nearby chairs. "Is that her? She's the one, right?" I thought she moved away. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat quietly, hands folded over my stomach, and let them look. They could whisper. They could laugh. They could pretend not to know my name. But I wasn't done. By the time I returned from my car, the venue was starting to fill. Guests trickled in wearing their best, linen suits, pastel dresses, wide-brimmed hats that probably hadn't seen sunlight since last spring. I stayed in the background, hovering near the side hallway, just watching. Someone waved me toward the side barn where the bridal party was doing final walkthroughs. "You're supposed to line up with the rest of the girls," a volunteer called. I hesitated, then nodded. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I'd already promised myself I wouldn't flinch. Inside, the air was thick with hairspray and perfume. Isolde stood in the center, arms folded, orchestrating everything like she was directing a Broadway show. Her voice snapped commands: adjust the veil, move the chair, fluff the dress. The planner beside her nodded, scribbled, adjusted. When I approached, the planner gave me a once-over, then looked down at her clipboard. "Sorry, there's been a change," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You're not in the lineup anymore." I blinked. "What do you mean?" There was a last-minute adjustment. "Nothing personal," she said, her voice stiff with politeness. "You're not walking today." My gaze shifted to Isolde, who offered a casual shrug. "Don't take it personally, Nola," she said, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "It's just logistics. We had to balance the sides, and it was already uneven." I clenched my jaw. "So, you replaced me?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she smiled like it was beneath her to explain. Trust me, this is better. You'll still have a great view. Better. For who? I looked over and saw her friend's daughter, Macy or Maddie, I couldn't remember, slipping into the spot I'd rehearsed yesterday, holding the bouquet I'd been given. She hadn't even been at the rehearsal. She didn't even know the steps. They didn't care. I stood frozen for a beat longer, then quietly stepped out, ignoring the eyes I felt burning into my back. I walked to the venue kitchen, somewhere no one would follow me unless they were looking for extra napkins. I leaned against the counter, letting the cool granite calm my nerves, but it didn't help. My hands were shaking. My throat burned. Then I heard footsteps. Soft ones. Familiar. Lainey. She peeked in and closed the door behind her. Nola, hey, are you okay? Why wouldn't I be? I said flatly. She looked uneasy. Her eyes darted. I didn't know they were gonna do that. I mean, I found out this morning, Anne. I cut her off. And you didn't say anything. She winced. I was going to, I swear. I didn't want to get involved. If I spoke up, it might have messed things up with Isolde. You know how she is. I do, I said quietly. And now I know how you are too. Nola, come on. I didn't mean anything by it. You know how tense things get at weddings. You mean how easy it is to pretend like something isn't happening when it's not happening to you. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Look, she said after a moment. I'm sorry, okay? I just didn't want to lose my spot. I nodded slowly. You didn't protect me. But I'll protect myself from now on. And I meant it. I left her standing there and walked back toward the dressing rooms. Isolde's laugh echoed through the cracked door like nothing had happened. As if my presence, or absence, didn't matter. Maybe it never had. I didn't stop. Didn't speak. I passed that door like it was a bad memory and pushed through the rear exit of the barn. The sunlight hit me hard. The wind tugged at my dress. I found my car again and slid behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only stable thing in my life. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I sat in silence and let my mind roll backward. Birthday parties with no cake. Field trips I wasn't signed up for. Family portraits where I was conveniently cropped out, it was just the lighting, they'd say. A lifetime of erasures so soft they didn't feel cruel, just easy. I had spent most of my life convincing myself that these things didn't matter, that I was above it, that I didn't need the recognition. But that wasn't strength. That was self-preservation. And I was done surviving in silence. 10 minutes later, I adjusted my dress, fixed my hair in the rearview mirror, and stepped out of the car. The parking lot was almost full now. Cars with bows on their hoods, grandparents with canes walking toward the entrance. I didn't walk fast. I didn't walk slow. I walked steady, into a space that had never made room for me and decided I would take the space anyway. I slipped back into the barn without announcement. I didn't go near the bridal party. I didn't ask for a seat to be changed. I didn't beg for inclusion. I took a chair in the third row from the back. I crossed my legs. Sat tall. And I watched. If they were going to cut me from the story, I would watch them try. I would remember every word, every fake laugh, every quiet betrayal. And when it was over, I would still be standing. The closer it got to the ceremony, the heavier the air felt. Guests were gathering outside for pre-ceremony photos, their laughter spilling through the hallway like perfume. I tried to keep out of sight, leaning near the catering table with a glass of water I wasn't drinking. I thought maybe, if I stayed quiet long enough, the noise would fade into something harmless. Then I heard Mom's voice behind me. Nola, come help your sister. She can't find one of her earrings. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to pretend I didn't hear. But habit won. The daughter in me, the one trained to fix what others broke, still answered when called. I followed her down the hall toward the bridal suite. The scent hit me before I walked in, champagne, roses, and that floral hairspray that clung to everything. The room shimmered with ivory fabric and chaos. Bridesmaids were fluffing Isolde's train, photographers were crouched in corners, and laughter bubbled everywhere like cheap champagne. And there she was, my sister, standing in front of the mirror, draped in white lace. She looked radiant. Untouchable. Her skin glowed beneath the makeup artist's brush, her hair curled into deliberate perfection. "About time," she said when she saw me in the doorway. "Can you check under that vanity? I think one of my earrings rolled under." I knelt down, careful not to snag my dress. I searched through dust and hairpins until I found the diamond stud glinting near the back wall. When I stood and handed it to her, I caught sight of something else, something that made my breath falter. Around Isolde's wrist was a gold bracelet. Not just any bracelet. It was Dad's. The one he gave me 3 years ago, on the porch after his last round of chemo. The one he said was meant for me. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "That's mine." Isolde turned to the mirror, fastening her earring. "Excuse me." "The bracelet," I said, louder this time. "Dad gave it to me. That's mine." She laughed, soft and careless. "Oh, come on, Nola. You can't claim every sentimental trinket in this house." Mom appeared from behind the veil rack, voice sharp but polite. "Not now. We're moments away from guests arriving. Can we please not start drama?" I stared at them both. The laughter from the hall sounded distant now, muffled under the thudding in my chest. "This isn't drama," I said slowly. "That bracelet doesn't belong to her." Isolde turned, hands on her hips. "He's not here, is he?" The words hit like a slap. Mom's tone hardened. "Enough, both of you. Nola, this is your sister's day. Don't ruin it over something so small." I let out a shaky laugh. "Small?" My voice didn't shake, it sliced. "You've taken my place, my voice, my space in this family, and now you take what little he left me. But sure, let's call it small." The room went quiet. The makeup artist suddenly found something interesting in her bag. One of the bridesmaids whispered to another and slipped out the door. Isolde met my gaze in the mirror. The confidence cracked, just for a moment. Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She didn't have to. The silence said enough. Mom exhaled heavily. "Please," she murmured, "don't make this about you." I shook my head. "I'm not. You already did that for me." I turned and walked out before either of them could speak again. My heels clicked against the tile like punctuation marks, sharp, certain, final. In the corridor, I stopped long enough to steady my breath. I wasn't defeated, I felt strangely lighter. For the first time in years, I had said exactly what needed saying, and I hadn't raised my voice to do it. They could keep their dress, their picture-perfect lies, their audience. But that bracelet, no matter who wore it, would never stop belonging to me. Later, during cocktail hour, I stood near the refreshments table. Guests mingled around, their voices a hum of gossip and cheer. My cousin Nora approached with her glass of rose, squinting at the glint around Isolde's wrist from across the room. "That looks familiar," she said, half smiling. "Didn't your dad give you something just like that?" I met her eyes and smiled back. "It's not just like it," I said, loud enough for the group beside her to hear. "It is it." The laughter nearby faltered. "I guess someone decided it matched her shoes better," I added. The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. A few heads turned. One woman nearly choked on her drink. I didn't look away. I didn't soften it. I'd been quiet too long. Mom, across the room, froze when she heard me. Her polite hostess face wavered for just a second before she pasted the smile back on. I walked away from the table and stood by the open door, feeling the wind pull at the edge of my hair. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to fit in. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Isolde glance toward me. For the first time, she didn't look like the one in control. Her hand went instinctively to the bracelet. And I smiled. She could wear it, but she'd never carry what came with it, Dad's faith, his quiet pride, the memory of him clasping it around my wrist on that porch. Back then, he'd said, when you feel invisible, wear this and remember, I saw you. Now, standing in a room full of people who'd spent years pretending not to, I finally saw myself. And once I stopped hiding, they had to decide, either bury me louder or silence me for good. After what happened with the bracelet, I stepped outside to breathe. The wind had picked up, blowing through the corridor like it had somewhere more important to be. I walked down the side hall, away from the voices, away from the photographs, and leaned against the brick wall beneath the string lights. I didn't need more proof of how they operated, but apparently, the universe wasn't done showing me. A small girl, maybe 8, rounded the corner with a wrapped box in her arms. She paused when she saw me and smiled shyly. "Miss Nola?" she asked. "That's me," I said cautiously. She held out the gift. "They said to bring this to the bride's table, but you're closer." I nodded, taking it gently. "Thanks, sweetheart. You did good." As she disappeared down the hallway, I turned the box over in my hands. The tag read, "To Isolde, with all our love, from Mom and Dad." I froze. I knew this box. I recognized the pattern of the ribbon. I remembered wrapping it, just weeks ago. But I'd been told it wasn't needed. That they'd gone with something more formal. That my gift didn't match the color scheme. I untied the bow with numb fingers. Inside was the vase I'd made, hand-thrown, glazed in ivory and gold, delicate and intentional. My signature was at the bottom, carved into the base. And tucked under the tissue paper was a card. Not my handwriting. The note read, "Made with love for our Isolde, from Mom and Dad. May your marriage be filled with beauty." My heart pounded in my chest. I reached into my purse and pulled out the original invoice, still folded, creased, soft from handling. My name. My handwriting. My creation. And yet, here it was, signed off as theirs. Like I never existed. Like the effort, the hours, the thought I'd put into it belonged to someone else. Erased, again. I stared at the card so long the edges started to blur. I wasn't even angry at first. Just tired. Tired of the way they always made me vanish in plain sight. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But it was constant. This time, I didn't put the box back. I carried it with me, straight down the corridor toward the front lawn, where the ceremony chairs were lined up and the guests had started to settle. The air buzzed with anticipation. Laughter, clinking glasses, and those last-minute instructions people always whisper before the music starts. I scanned the crowd and found the wedding coordinator near the arbor, clipboard in hand. "Hi," I said, tapping her shoulder. "Would you mind asking August if I could speak to him privately? Just a quick moment. It's important." She glanced at me, unsure. "Ah. He's about to walk down the aisle in 15. I know. That's why it can't wait." She looked at my face and must have seen something she couldn't argue with, because a moment later, August appeared, adjusting his cufflinks, looking curious but polite. "Hey," he said. "Everything all right?" I handed him the vase, the card, and then my original receipt. "I gave this to you both as a gift. I was told it wasn't wanted. I let it go. But then I saw it, rewrapped, relabeled, and presented as if it came from someone else. From them." I didn't cry. I didn't accuse. I just looked him in the eye and said, "I was told I wasn't good enough to be remembered." He looked at the receipt first, then the card, then the vase. His face changed. Something in his jaw tensed. "This is beautiful," he said, voice low. "I had no idea." "I figured," I said. "I don't need an apology. I just thought you should know before you say anything today you can't take back." He nodded, slow and deliberate. "Thank you," he said. Truly. For telling me. We didn't speak another word. I handed him the vase and walked away. Back inside, I took my seat, not in the back row this time. Someone had moved the cards. I was now in the second row, on the aisle, directly in view of the altar. I didn't ask who changed it. The wedding coordinator leaned over and whispered something to one of the assistants. She nodded, then looked at me. Her face didn't change, but her eyes did. People started looking. Not everyone. But enough. Some heads tilted. Some whispers passed. A few tried not to stare. And I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat taller. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting credit. It was about the truth, finally having it seen. All my life, I had let them erase me in the name of keeping peace, of not making a scene, of being the bigger person. But sometimes the bigger person isn't the one who stays quiet. It's the one who finally speaks. I adjusted my dress, folded my hands in my lap, and looked straight ahead. Let them whisper. Let them squirm. Let them try to explain it away later. But they couldn't unsee what they'd seen. And if they thought that was bold, they had no idea what was about to hit them. I was halfway down the aisle when it happened. Each footstep rang sharp against the wooden floor, heels clicking in steady cadence like a countdown to something I hadn't yet named. I kept my eyes forward, never straying, even as the weight of their stares pressed against my shoulders. I thought if I moved with just enough poise, chin up, spine straight, I could reach the exit before my presence became a spectacle. Before I became a cautionary tale whispered about over cake and champagne. But fate is not so easily outrun. The music stopped mid-note. The sudden silence was brutal, like a slap across the face. It stripped the air bare. Heads turned. I felt the shift behind me, the collective inhale of guests who suddenly remembered I existed. Still, I walked. I thought if I could just keep moving, one step, then another, I could disappear behind that heavy door and erase myself from their memory. I didn't make it that far. From the front of the altar, Isolde's voice sliced through the quiet like a silver knife. Wait, she said, too sweet, too still. Before I say I do, I want to honor someone very special today. Every pair of eyes swiveled. The room felt like it tilted, ever so slightly. My body hesitated, not in fear, but in foresight. I knew that tone. I had heard it 1,000 times, always followed by something that left a mark. She pointed at me. There she is, Isolde said brightly, like she was offering a toast. The strongest woman I know. The one sitting right there, alone, carrying a baby no man wants to claim. Gasps. No. Not yet. Just the stunned silence of disbelief. The slow drag of realization as her words settled like dust on everything. Let's all clap for her, shall we? A pause stretched taut. A single breath. Maybe two. Then, laughter. Not from everyone. But enough. A burst of nervous giggles rippled from the back. Someone stifled a laugh and ended up choking on it. Another whispered, she really just said that, in a tone that didn't know if it was horrified or impressed. A man near the buffet muttered, Christ, like he'd seen someone bleed. I didn't move. Not frozen. Just calculating. Isolde smiled wider, sensing blood in the water. She held the microphone like a dagger now, not a prop. It takes real courage, she continued, voice syrupy and sharp, to show up like that. Pregnant. No name for the father. Some women would have had the decency to stay home. Another wave of snickers. Laughter this time, real, unashamed, ugly. I placed both hands on my stomach. Not in shame, never that. It was instinct. A shield. A promise. A declaration. Mom sat 2 rows ahead, next to Aunt Grace, her back straight as a rod, eyes fixed on the floor as though she could sink through it. She didn't move to stop any of it. The officiant looked lost. He glanced from Isolde to the groom, then to the silent crowd, unsure if he should intervene or simply disappear. Then it happened. A voice crackled through the sound system, smaller, higher, uncertain. I mean, I'd rather my daughter lose her dignity than lose this wedding. The room gasped, not a metaphorical gasp, but the actual, audible kind. Sharp intakes of breath that made the chandeliers tremble. It was Mom's voice. Tinny, distorted by a speakerphone. But unmistakable. That's her, someone said, horror slipping between syllables. That's Mireille. She said that, came another voice. I turned to the back corner where the sound had come from. A child stood there, young, no more than 7 or 8. One of the cousins. His hand clutched a phone like it was a live wire. His knuckles were white. The screen still glowed. He hadn't meant to be the one to set it off. But he had. Mom shot to her feet so fast her chair skittered back, nearly crashing to the floor. That's not what she began, but her words were crushed under the weight of the silence. No one was listening. Not anymore. Isolde's hand trembled. The mic slipped to her side like a flag at half-mast. Her face was drained of color, lips parted in disbelief. This wasn't the climax she'd orchestrated. This was something else. Something real. Something raw. I stood. Deliberate. Slow. The silence now wasn't stunned, it was damning. I didn't rush. I didn't tremble. I just rose. My eyes found my mother. Her expression was blank, drained of performance. For once, there was no spin. Then I turned to Isolde. I forgive you, I said. Not loud, but clear enough to reach every corner of the room. She blinked. Confused. Maybe even afraid. But I'm done making myself small so you can feel big. Then I turned away from them both. One hand over the swell of my belly. And I walked. Not toward a man. Not toward shame or vindication. Just toward the door. There were no tears. No collapse. I wasn't a victim exiting the scene of her public shaming, I was the one who had just refused to let the script play out. Eyes followed me, but I didn't feel their judgment anymore. I felt seen. And not the way Isolde wanted me to be seen. Not as a scandal. Not as a punchline. As a woman who chose to stand tall in the middle of a storm. At the end of the aisle, I paused. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows, bathing the exit in gold. My silhouette cut a clean line through it, like a curtain call that didn't beg for applause. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. And that's when the door opened, just as my hand reached for it. A voice behind me, familiar, warm, steady, said my name. This time, it wasn't a weapon. This time, it sounded like grace. The door opened slowly, with a weight that shifted the very air in the room. Not the kind of entrance that demands attention, no slamming, no shouting. Just quiet authority. The kind that made every whisper choke off mid-syllable. The kind that didn't need permission to command the moment. A figure stepped through the frame, silhouetted in golden light. Calder. He didn't rush. Didn't falter. His steps were deliberate, smooth, unafraid. There was no urgency in his stride, only certainty. As though he'd waited long enough already. As though nothing, not the scorn of 100 eyes, not the shame engineered by people who'd never carried a single burden he had, could keep him from this walk. He moved through the aisle like it was built for him. Like he wasn't parting guests so much as gravity itself. And when he reached the center of the space, just behind me, his voice broke the silence, soft but resonant, carrying the weight of a promise that had never been allowed to breathe. Wife. That was it. One word. But he said it like it meant everything. Like it was both confession and conviction. Like it was the first time he'd said it and the last time he ever planned to say it without being heard. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I felt it. The words sank into my skin, moved through my bones, and landed somewhere deep in my chest, an anchor, just as my grip on the moment had started to slip. All around us, the room held its breath. And then came the aftershock. Gasps. Not the polite kind. Not surprise. Shock. Chairs creaked under the strain of shifting weight. People leaned toward one another, mouths cupped against ears. One woman dropped her clutch with a clatter. Someone hissed, "Jesus Christ," and somewhere near the back, a champagne flute shattered as it hit the floor too hard. But none of it mattered. Because Calder was beside me now. He lowered himself onto one knee, not to beg, not to perform, but to meet me at eye level. Like someone who finally understood what it meant to show up. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice clear and low. "I should never have left." I didn't speak. Not yet. His gaze didn't waver. "I wasn't scared of you. I was scared of them. Of what they said they'd do to you if I stayed." I felt the muscles in my shoulders twitch, the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding lodge in my throat. "They threatened everything," he continued. "Said if I didn't walk away, they'd destroy you. Tell the papers lies. Start rumors. Make your life hell." He paused. And I believed them. His hands were steady now, not like before. But I don't anymore. I don't care what it costs. I'm here. And I'm not leaving again. The room wasn't just still now, it was holding a verdict in its throat. Someone near the front muttered, "What the hell is this?" And another voice followed it with a confused, "Is this real?" Then came a sound that pulled attention like a magnet. The child from before, the one who had unknowingly detonated my mother's secret, was moving again. He stepped forward, small shoulders squared with more courage than most adults could muster. In his hand was a different phone. He raised it, calm this time, and hit play. This wasn't an accident. The recording was grainy, but the voice was unmistakable. Isolde. Furious. Venomous. "If you don't leave her," her voice crackled through the speaker, "I will tell every client you harassed me. I'll destroy your name. Your business. Your life. Walk away, or I walk over you." There it was. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in stunned disbelief. A collective inhale, like 100 lungs forgetting their rhythm. Then whispers, hot and sharp. "She blackmailed him. Did you hear that? Is that legal?" Chairs scraped back. Someone stood up abruptly, face red with fury. A man swore under his breath. A woman clutched her pearls in a gesture so cliched it would have been funny if it hadn't been so grotesque. And Isolde. She didn't fall. But her knees bent slightly, as though the foundation beneath her had finally remembered it wasn't made of stone. The power in her posture leaked out inch by inch. Her expression didn't break, it crumbled. Not a single word escaped her lips. Not even a denial. Calder rose beside me, taller now. Not in stature, but in presence. I could feel him behind me, not as a shield, but as a pillar. And then another shift. August. The groom. He stepped down from the altar with the weight of a man watching the scaffolding of his own life collapse. His steps were slow. Measured. As he approached Isolde, the air between them bent under the pressure of all the things neither of them could take back. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just said, "I was about to marry someone who needed to humiliate another woman to feel seen." Isolde's lips parted, but the silence swallowed her attempt at a reply. August reached to his chest, unpinned the white rose boutonniere he'd worn all morning, and placed it gently on the floor in front of her. "I'm not doing this," he said. And then he walked away. No ceremony. No theatrics. Just absence. And that, somehow, said more than shouting ever could. Isolde turned, eyes darting, lips twitching as though searching for a line in a script that no longer existed. She looked to my mother, Mireille, for help. But Mireille stood still, hands half raised, caught between shame and paralysis. She didn't move toward her daughter. She didn't reach for me either. She was just stuck. And me? I stayed where I was. I didn't chase, didn't comfort, didn't flinch. Guests began to drift out, their silence louder than any applause could have been. Some stared at the floor. Some whispered, eyes bright with the kind of excitement that lives for scandal. One woman dabbed her eyes. Another simply shook her head and left. There was no bouquet toss. No first dance. No cake cutting. Just the slow, disorienting exhale of a wedding unraveling in real time. And in the middle of it all, I stood. Not triumphant. Not angry. Just real. Surviving. But this time, survival didn't mean shrinking. It meant standing in the wreckage with both feet planted and eyes open. Not hiding. Not apologizing. I reached for Calder's hand. Not out of need. But out of choice. My choice. No one clapped. No one cheered. But I didn't need their noise. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of silence. I wasn't afraid of being seen. And as I walked out of that room, my head high, my fingers interlaced with the man who chose to stay, I wasn't running from anything. I was carrying my name with me. Not like a burden. But like a crown. The weeks after the wedding unfolded quietly, like fog lifting off a mountain one slow inch at a time. No one called. Not from my family, at least. Some guests sent texts, awkward, cautious. A few brave ones messaged on social media to say things like, I had no idea, or you were graceful, truly. I read each one but rarely replied. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because I had no more energy left to explain the shape of my silence over the years. Isolde deleted her social media accounts the next day. Not a post, not a story, not a trace. One cousin said she'd gone off the grid, and someone else mentioned she'd moved back in with Mom temporarily. I didn't ask for details. Mom hadn't reached out either. Not a call. Not even a forwarded chain email like she used to send with Bible verses and blurry images of roses. And I was okay with that. Every morning, I woke before sunrise, stepped outside barefoot, and watered the geraniums lining my front porch. The morning air in Asheville had started to carry a hint of fall, cooler, sharper. I loved it. I'd wrap my hands around the small curve of my belly and let the stillness settle into my bones. Calder had started fixing the roof the week after everything fell apart. Not because I asked, because he saw the leak and got up there with a ladder and quiet determination. He didn't say much during those early mornings. Just brought me tea in the same chipped mug I'd always used, kissed my temple, and went to work. Sometimes on the porch steps, sometimes on the pantry door that never closed right. He moved through the house like he was making peace with every corner. Each nail he hammered, each loose tile he mended, it all felt like a kind of rewrite. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just intentional. One afternoon, while he was out buying paint, I went into the hall closet and pulled out a small velvet pouch from the back of a drawer. The fabric was dusty, but the memory it held was untouched. Inside was the bracelet. The real one. The one Dad gave me that night on the porch, after his second round of chemo. He hadn't said much, he wasn't the sentimental type. But when he clasped it around my wrist, he looked me in the eye and said, when they forget you, this will remind you I didn't. I'd kept it hidden all this time. Not because I was afraid someone would steal it, but because I wasn't ready to wear it. The weight of it meant something. Something I hadn't earned yet. Until now. I ran a soft cloth over its edges, watching the light catch on the engraving, NV. It was mine. Later that day, when the house smelled like cinnamon from the slow cooker and the wind had picked up outside, I called my niece, Maya, into the living room. She was the one who'd played the recording. The child who had, without knowing, changed everything. She sat on the rug, legs crossed, hair tied in a crooked ponytail. I knelt in front of her, the pouch in my hands. This, I said, was given to me by someone who saw me when no one else did. Maya tilted her head. Grandpa. I nodded. Yes. He gave it to me when I felt like I didn't matter. When I thought my voice didn't count. Her eyes widened slightly, waiting. I'm not giving this to you because you've been perfect, I said with a small smile. I'm giving it to you because you were brave enough to tell the truth. Even when no one asked you to. Even when it cost you something. She reached out gently, taking the bracelet like it was glass. But what if they don't like that I have it, she whispered. I leaned in. Then you remind them that some things don't need their permission. She grinned and slipped it over her wrist, where it dangled loosely. That night, while she napped on the couch with a book covering her chest, I returned to my studio, the small sunroom off the kitchen where I made pottery. The shelves were half full with new work. Pieces I'd thrown in the days after the wedding. The lines were stronger now. More defined. I picked up a half-finished sculpture. Clay still soft, edges still raw. I smoothed one curve with my thumb and exhaled deeply. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Mom might never apologize. Isolde might rewrite her version of the story and sell it to anyone who'd still listen. But that no longer mattered. What mattered was that I had chosen what to keep. The legacy. The love that never shouted. The silence that protected, not erased. I didn't need a stage to reclaim myself. I just needed one solid, grounded place to begin again. And this home, this imperfect, patched-together house filled with tea-stained mugs and crooked doors, was more than enough. I never got their approval. But I got my peace. And this time, I'm not giving it back. Sometimes, healing doesn't come with apologies. It comes with choosing peace, even when no one offers it to you. This story wasn't about revenge through destruction, but about reclaiming worth after years of quiet erasure. What would you do if the people meant to protect you were the ones holding the knife? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more